This is Fate from Diablo3strategyguide.com, bringing you another video to go along with our strategy guide. As our wizard expert in Inferno, it's my job to bring you the most up-to-date builds and content for the wizard class. The build we'll be going over today is the Arcane Orb based kiting build. There's a couple basic assumptions we'll be making in this video, so let's quickly go over those. Similar to the Blizzard Hydra build I went over last week, we're going to be ignoring items. Items, of course, are important, but for the sake of simplicity, we're going to be going over more of the mechanics of the build and what makes it work. This is a level 60 build. While I don't believe we're using any runes unlocked at level 60, this video features Inferno gameplay and will assume that you're playing at that level of difficulty. I'm also going to assume that you know the very basics of kiting. Another of our team members, The Fox, made a great video on kiting that covers the very basics of it for all you new players. So let's get on to the build. Alright, so let's quickly take a look at the 6 active skills being used right here. The first skill we have activated on the left click button is Magic Missile with Seeker. And this skill is a great general damage skill, doesn't use any arcane power of course, it has a ton of utility, you can spam it a long ways away, and it's really useful in kind of these special situations. We'll get into a little bit more of these in the later part of this video. The second damage dealing spell is kind of the big arcane power consumer, and that is Arcane Orb of course. I like to use Tap the Source here, which lowers the cost of arcane power here significantly, but I've seen other successful builds running Obliteration or Celestial Orb. Obliteration in particular could be used if you have a lot of skills, or a lot of modifiers rather, on helms, wands, that kind of thing, that grow your overall maximum arcane power, as well as arcane power regeneration. The rest of the spells are much more standard. We have Diamond Skin with Crystal Shell, Magic Weapon with Force Weapon, Energy Armor with Force Armor. These three in particular are usually featured in nearly every single high-level wizard build in Inferno. Magic Weapon simply makes you do a lot more damage and is basically a passive skill. Diamond Skin and Energy Armor help you to stay alive at a much more reasonable rate. And the final skill is Teleport with the Fracture Rune. This is still a pretty commonly used skill. It offers you great utility as well as mobility. And in this build, because we'll be kiting so much, the fractures help a lot to serve as a tank. Passive skills, we've got the very standard Astral Presence and Glass Cannon, as well as Illusionist. Illusionist works very well with Teleport because it will allow you to basically teleport in any sort of situation where you're taking a lot of damage. This also kind of puts the onus on the player to play very well because it puts simply more power into the player's hands. In this video we're going to show me killing several elite mobs, and kind of the assumption that we're making here is that if you're able to kill these elite mobs, which are very important in Inferno due to Nephilim Valor as well as other reasons, that you'll be able to kill kind of the white mobs that are generally much more easy to take down. So first up, you can see I'm kind of wandering this dungeon on my butcher run. I run into the skeleton, and you can see that in this build it's really just about kiting, moving backwards. Really it's about timing your movements with the monster's movements, and it's really about controlling spacing. So you can see here the big reason why you want to be able to clear out these levels to the full extent is when you run into these encounters, the more space you have, the more power that the wizard player has, because you can move back, and use your mobility with Teleport to kind of just take advantage and score free shot after free shot. And generally speaking, the quicker that your enemy mob moves towards you, the more you want to be moving backwards before shooting at them. So if an opponent moves especially slowly towards you, you can kite much quicker. You can scoot and shoot at a much quicker rhythm than you would be able to otherwise. So you can see that I utilize the full spacing, almost taking this guy in a complete tour around the map, and just kind of slowly kiting back, taking my time. He moves at kind of at a moderate pace. Teleport and Diamond Skin are used kind of in situations where you are in trouble. You'll generally want to use Teleport first because this is really used because of the illusionist rune, rather, which allows you to use that if you are ever taking a high amount of damage. You'll now see me taking on a vortex mob, and this is a little bit trickier because vortex, of course, messes up your mobility. You'll see that against these ones, managing your cooldown is extremely important. Your kind of two escape methods are of course teleport and diamond skin. Illusionist helps out a lot with teleport, but you're going to just definitely want to be able to time these cooldowns so you can prepare for taking heavy amounts of damage when they do cast that vortex spell on you. This is of course also very similar to kind of fast mobs and that kind of thing. You can see the fractures are also extremely helpful for kind of allowing you to gain space on your enemy when they suck you in. And you'll see that it's just kind of very slowly, methodically taking down the enemies here. Every time when you shoot, there should be movement immediately after. There should almost never be any time where you just shoot and stand still. Generally speaking, this will be moving backwards, but if you're facing an especially weak mob, which you know you will kill, then the offensive move forward is a good idea to continue to control space. So one interesting thing about this build is that other than Arcane Orb, which kind of offers a very minimal sort of stun, knockback, snare type ability, that you have no kind of disable, Frost Nova, or kind of a major area of effect slow such as Blizzard, which is commonly used of course in the Blizzard Hydra build. And so this of course puts the pressure on the player to do all the damage. In the Blizzard Hydra build, you could simply run around and let your Hydra do most of the work, if necessary, if in a particularly dangerous situation. But this build requires the player to do the actual damage. And so it's a great build to practice kiting and a lot of these core wizard concepts on. You can also see a nifty tactic here is to use the magic missile with Seeker to kind of shoot around the corners there and kind of just pour some extra damage on enemies. But you can see that this build is really based off of how the wizard moves. If the wizard just stood still with this build and it simply attacked, they would get killed every time. Because the wizard is such a fragile class, this is relying on the wizard playing well in order to actually kill the enemies. And that's something that I really like about this build. And if you are having trouble kiting in Infernal difficulty and you simply want to get better, this is a great build to use to kind of get to that upper level. Alright, so now we're going to watch the conclusion of my Butcher run, which of course culminates in the killing of the actual Butcher. And in this, there's not a whole lot that's really relevant for the Butcher. You of course fight him much differently than you would kind of the normal elite mobs. It's more, against these types of bosses, it's more about knowing the attacks, being able to predict when they're coming, dodging them, and just pouring on damage whenever you can. Alright, so I've covered a lot of the strengths of the build. What are some of the negatives about the build? Well, it's simply harder to use than a lot of builds. The Blizzard Hydra build simply is much easier to use. You have to move a lot less because you have such a large area of effect. Slow cooldown, then it's simply much easier to out-navigate your enemies. So that's definitely something that kind of goes against this build. You also have to do all the damage. In the Blizzard Hydra build, you could just sit back and let the Hydra do the damage. Of course, you'll kill things much faster if you are doing damage as well, but it wasn't necessary to actually make that build work. One other negative to the build is it doesn't use Hydra. Of all the spells that cost actual arcane power, Hydra packs the most per arcane power cost, considerably. And this doesn't take advantage of this because it simply does not use Hydra and of course not the Venom rune. One other really hard part with this build is in situations where you usually either immediately spawn or end up in kind of really these close quarters situations with not a lot of space to navigate. the wizard will have a lot of trouble with this build. That's simply because you don't have room to kite. And so a lot of times when I was first using this build, I would die a lot at the very beginnings of levels because I didn't have room to kite back. Or if you're with a party that wants to just skip forward and not kill everything, it becomes much trickier and much easier to die, as you'll be in a kiting scenario and you'll be moving backwards, and you'll often run into oncoming mobs which will add additional damage to you, and that just makes the situation much trickier. Thank you for watching. This has been another Diablo3StrategyGuide.com video. Please subscribe to us on YouTube as well as check out our website. We have lots of tips and tricks on how to get to the highest level difficulty, where to farm there, both for lower level players as well as higher level Inferno difficulty players. So please check out our website. Thank you.